Hello everybody, welcome back to another tropical forecast, and we have a very important upload here on now confirmed tropical storm Zeta. So we are one named storm left to tie 2005. That is crazy. This is the 27th named storm of the 2020 hurricane season, and it could very well affect portions of Mexico and the U.S. Gulf Coast. Tropical storm Zeta, surprisingly, going to possibly become a hurricane for portions of the Yucatan Peninsula and maybe even be a hurricane for the U.S. coast. Landfall. I did not expect this to actually become a hurricane, especially going into the Gulf of Mexico, but it seems if it's due to it being stationary in the Western Caribbean, it is going to be taking advantage of those warm waters and favorable atmospheric conditions. The only thing is, this does have a chance to weaken to a tropical storm before hitting the U.S. There is always a possibility because the northern Gulf has very cold waters and it has a ton of shear, and it very well could be opened up. So we're going to be talking about the timing, where it can make landfall, the max wind, who's at biggest risk. Could it become a hurricane, or could it even become even weaker than that? That's exactly what we're talking about. All this information here as well. Going to be mentioning Mexico, Cuba, and the U.S. Gulf Coast. Before we get to the video, though, please subscribe if you're new, hit the like button and post notification icon. And later today, I will have another upload on Winter Storm Billy as it brings snow across portions of the Midwest and the Rockies. But without further ado, let's get into this video. So last time I made a video, this was still an invest, but it became a tropical depression last night, and it became a tropical storm overnight, and all because of it being stationary in the most favorable waters in the whole Western Atlantic, because the rest of the Western Atlantic has below 29 degrees Celsius. But where it is right now has 30 degrees Celsius. It's taking advantage, and it's basically stalling. It's basically 0 miles an hour at this point. But it's nearly stationary, and it's at 40 miles an hour. So it just became a tropical storm not too long ago. But it is minimal center pressure at 1,005 millibars. So it is kind of just reaching that central pressure worth being a tropical storm. So there's Zeta. Epsilon still at 75 miles an hour. So it's gradually weakening. But the minimal center pressure, that's really just struggling to drop. It's at 960 millibars at a 75 mile an hour hurricane. That's a borderline tropical storm and hurricane, and it has pressure worth of a category 3. That's pretty impressive, but it is moving east-northeast at 35 miles an hour. That's extremely quickly there. That's the speed limit for some cars in some areas. But yeah, there we got tropical storm Zeta there, 40 miles an hour, and possibly expected to become a hurricane before hitting the Yucatan Peninsula. Yes, a third landfall for the Yucatan Peninsula, I believe, in all of the month of October. But yeah, that's exactly where we're looking at here. But let's go to looking at our brightness. So obviously we had Gamma and Delta that hit Mexico earlier this month in October, and now at the end of the month we could very well have Zeta now hit the Yucatan Peninsula, more like Cancun. That's 3 landfalls for one specific area in a time frame of 3.5 weeks. That's pretty impressive, but I mean, look at this. I can tell it's nearly stationary. The low pressure is way up here, though. It's not on all the convection. It's actually north of all that convection. So you're probably thinking, oh my God, it's so close to Nicaragua and Honduras. It's going to make landfall in Central America, or it's going to have land interaction and not strengthen. Well, this is where all the convection is correct, but that low pressure is way to the north of it and expected to slowly move into the areas of the Yucatan Peninsula, expected to possibly make landfall in that general area in around 24 to 36 hours. It's stalling right now. So that's actually not good news for areas for Central America, because that means it will bring in some quite the heavy rain. But the worst of the rain obviously is kind of to the northeast of that low pressure. This is kind of where the worst of the rain is. So for the Cayman Islands, you guys will be getting some heavy rain for the next few days, which obviously isn't the best. It's not the something you want too much here, but you know, it is what it is. At least it's not like Delta that was a category 4 right before landfall for Mexico. But you do see, there it is. The low pressure is way to the north, around right here. That's where that low pressure is. So don't let all this convection to the bottom trick you. This low pressure isn't there. It's not here. I mean, it's not making landfall in Central America other than Mexico, but it's not going to be making landfall for like areas like Honduras or Belize or or the areas of Nicaragua. But it is expected now to once it is nearly stationary. It basically is moving around 0 miles an hour to 1 mile an hour. But last time it was moving west northwest. So you can say it's moving west northwest at basically 0 miles an hour or less than 1 mile an hour. I don't think it's not exactly 0 miles an hour. It's kind of like just less than 1 mile an hour. So it's basically not moving. But last time it was going west northwest. So you could be saying it's moving west northwest as as a sloth speed. Let's just say that. But there it is. You can kind of do see it has some pretty impressive. It does have the outflow right here. You can very well see the outflow. You can also see some of the outflow as well right here. You can kind of see the little hook right there. I mean, it's not the most organized really, but you can kind of see we are starting to see that center convection start to blow up. Could be at a dural maximum by later today. It looks like it's trying to get to its dural maximum. It was at a dural minimum last night, I believe so. And that means dural maximum is next. So it's not really at a dural maximum right now, but it's escalating. It's climbing its way to getting to its dural maximum. So we can very well see this having just a ton of center convection, very nice banding by the end of today or kind of the midday. Obviously, the waters is a big factor in this growth right now for Zeta. As you do see, like I did say, this is in the most favorable waters of the whole Western Atlantic. As you do see, not even the Western Caribbean, or not even the Eastern Caribbean can really compare really, unless you are near the Trinidad and Tobago area where it has 30 degrees Celsius, but this also has 30 degrees Celsius, so it is kind of tied for the warmest areas. And obviously, you're not going to have a system form right here near Venezuela where we have 32 plus degrees Celsius waters. Obviously, you're not going to have swingers form right there. That would be really weird if that happened. But it's kind of a perfect match that out of all the areas it could have stalled, it stalled right in the perfect area right before it goes in the open water of the Gulf, where of course it isn't the most favorable waters. Obviously, you do need anything over 26 degrees Celsius to withstand a tropical low, including hurricane and obviously a tropical storm. The stronger the system is, kind of the warmer waters it needs to withstand. So if you want a category 5, you're probably not going to want 26 degrees Celsius. You're probably going to want 28, 29, 30, 31 to withstand a category 1. For a tropical storm, you can probably have 25 as well, maybe 24. It really just depends. You can maybe have 24 degrees Celsius waters to withstand a tropical storm, but it would probably have to be extremely weak or just the most disorganized tropical storm ever. But as you do see, this is expected by the National Hurricane Center to make landfall in eastern Louisiana and then go northeastward inland into the areas of the southeast. So let's just follow the National Hurricane Center. I may not agree with the National Hurricane Center, but let's just follow what they're going to be showing. This is kind of what they're showing there, making landfall near areas where Marco was supposed to make landfall before it died, or where Delta was supposed to make landfall before it moved more to the west. But let's just follow the waters. As you do see, it does actually have some decent waters until the point to kind of right here. But you gotta also think there's also shear and the dry air that also will be in the territory. So you're probably thinking, oh, it has plenty of time until it gets to that 26 degrees Celsius. So of course it could become a strong hurricane, the Gulf like Delta and Sally did and Marco did, rapidly intensifying. Well, yes, you're right. It's not really until you get 50 miles off the Gulf Coast that you kind of get those really cold waters. But also you got to think about the shear and the dry air that's not only off the Gulf Coast, but in general the whole Gulf or the whole Gulf of Mexico, where we really have that ton of shear and that dry air. So you got to really think about that as well, not just SSTs that make storms stronger or that impact their growth. What I'm thinking is, this is what I think. I think this is going to make landfall more to the east of the National Hurricane Center showing. So this is where the system is right now. That's kind of the best area where it is. I'm thinking it's going to make landfall right near the Yucatan area and then kind of make landfall kind of in the Alabama and Mississippi border. That's kind of what I'm thinking. I think that because I think that because if it is continuing to stall and it's going to be in the Western Caribbean and not make landfall in Cancun until that 36-hour time frame, I think it doesn't have a good chance to possibly take that northern turn sooner. Like I said, National Hurricane Center is predicting a landfall there for the far eastern inland area, or the far eastern portion of Louisiana. So basically, if it just moves a tad more to the east, that would mean a landfall for Mississippi and Alabama. Because in order to actually hit areas like Gulfport, it'll have to go through Louisiana first, which means it's not going to be direct landfall. So if you want a direct landfall for Mississippi, it's going to have to be right on the border with Alabama. And I think that's where I think landfall. So National Hurricane Center, let's actually move to a smaller pen size. National Hurricane Center is showing a landfall for this general area right there. I'm kind of thinking a landfall maybe right here. So I am predicting a bit more to the east. It's not a drastic change or anything, but that's kind of what I'm showing. But we do actually, let's actually reload. So, okay, there we go. Oh, actually, okay, actually, the National Hurricane Center agrees. I actually reloaded it, and they're actually showing what I'm saying. Okay, I'm glad I reloaded it because I thought, the 12 o'clock update came out, so I thought I might as well reload it. Okay, so I'm going to reverse what I just said for the past 3 minutes. The National Hurricane Center showing what I'm saying. They're also showing a Mississippi, Alabama landfall now. Okay, I'm glad I reloaded that. So that they're, okay, so yeah, the National Hurricane Center re-upload just shows exactly what I just said. Okay, so that's pretty some good news, but I do see that wind feels really small, and it's expected to speed up a good bit compared to its speed now. So it's probably only going to be moving maybe 5 miles an hour, but that's a lot better compared to 0 miles an hour. But we do have tropical storm warnings in effect for the western Cuba area once again. This can bring flashbacks to Gama. This can bring flashbacks to Marco, flashbacks to Delta. We're getting a lot of flashbacks from these warnings across the Yucatan Peninsula and the Yucatan Canal. As you see, the hurricane watches are in effect for the Cancun area and the general little panhandle area of the Mexico area. Expected to make landfall just before the evening hours of tomorrow, and then expected to become a hurricane. It could possibly become a hurricane inland, as the National Hurricane Center shows it becoming a hurricane, or coming. Basically, okay, National Hurricane Center shows it going inside, making landfall in Mexico as a tropical storm, and then coming out of Mexico as a hurricane. So very well could strengthen into a hurricane inland, since it is going to be moving to a slow speed. It's going to be interacting with that water quite long, and then it's not going to come into play until it's over at land. And it seems as if it's going to be going west-northwest, and that's going to make it look like it's going to make landfall for western Louisiana, but it's going to be following that shear, because that impressive amount of shear in the western Gulf is going to push it all the way to a sharp northeastern turn, which is why it shows a landfall now for the Mississippi, Alabama area, which is exactly why I am saying a Mississippi, Alabama landfall as well. So it just all comes into play. So that shear, not only will it possibly affect its growth in the Gulf, but it also will affect its path. So Louisiana could actually get spared by this. Could be the only storm they got spared by. They didn't get spared by Cristobal. They got pretty lucky with Marco, but they still got hit by it. Delta, obviously, Laura. They did get some impact from Sally as well, but expected to only be, I believe, a 75-mile-an-hour system. Let's actually refresh what they are showing. So yeah, they're still only showing a 75-mile-an-hour strength max, from 75 outside of Mexico to 75 all the way up into the landfall for the Gulf Coast. So it's not going to be really strengthening much whatsoever in that whole time frame, which is why I'm saying that waters plus shear and drier, it's going to help limit its strength. I'm not saying it's going to weaken it. I'm just saying it's not going to strengthen it much, if it is going to strengthen it at all. It might just say the same, because it's not like that shear is going to just go into that storm full on and kill it. But it's also not like it's going to get spared from the shear. That shear will get inside of it, but it's going to be very limited. Same thing, the dryer. The dryer is going to get inside of this low pressure. That's what global models expect. That's what I expect. But it's not going to be to the point where it dies or it weakens, because that dryer is going to be very limited. and it's going to kind of be really only there for only a tad bit. So the National Hurricane Center, I can actually agree with. I actually, for once this season, agree with it. The National Hurricane Center pretty good this storm around, especially with the new update. As you see, there's that cone. We still have a few models getting to the landfall of Louisiana, but we are starting to see an eastern trend where they're showing a landfall for Alabama, Mississippi, and even the Florida Panhandle. I won't rule out the Florida Panhandle. They definitely will get pretty big impacts, but direct landfall wise, I think that I don't think a Florida landfall is the most likelihood. I think an Alabama, Mississippi landfall is the most likely. When I say 2 states, I mean it's probably the best outcome of this, or not the best outcome, the most likelihood is that it makes landfall on the border between Alabama and Mississippi, which means it's going to make probably a direct landfall for both states because it's going to make landfall around the border. So it could shift a bit more, attach to the west and actually hit, or it could hit Gulfport, or it can move a tad to the east and hit Mobile. But I think the chance of it actually hitting Pensacola or the Florida Panhandle, I think that's really limited at this point, because in order to hit the Florida Panhandle, it would have had to strengthen the Gulf, and it just doesn't look like it's going to strengthen much, if even at all, in the Gulf. But it doesn't look like it's going to also weaken at all at the Gulf, so it's going to kind of stay exactly the same throughout the passage. We do have a few more malls getting into Category 1. Obviously, yesterday we didn't have any getting into Category 1, but we now have the majority, if not, or not majority, but we do have around just less than 50% getting this to a trop or to a hurricane, but very weak. 75 miles an hour. I don't see this getting past 85 miles an hour whatsoever. If it gets that strong, I'll be extremely surprised. But as of now, I am agreeing with the National Hurricane Center. This is actually the one time I'm actually impressed. I'm actually impressed the National Hurricane Center kind of showed what I'm saying, because for the whole time this year, the National Hurricane Center had just said exactly the opposite of what I said. Most of the times I was right. Sometimes the National Hurricane Center was right. But at this point, I actually really agree with the National Hurricane Center on this. So this is the 60 GFS, and they're finally getting a bit more reasonable. They are showing it actually not making landfall for Mexico or the Cancun area, which actually could support a more eastward landfall. At this point, I do see it hitting Mexico, and the GFS is actually showing it not hitting Mexico. But since GFS is not showing it hitting Mexico, that will impact where it makes landfall in the U.S. And obviously, the GFS guesses to hitting the Florida Panhandle. I know I've been saying Florida Panhandle isn't the most likely, but it's not impossible. There's still a growing chance of landfall there. But right now, it's making landfall kind of like at the it's kind of making landfall. Well, actually, it's making landfall on the Alabama-Florida border. Not really making landfall on Panhandle per se. It's kind of going to make landfall exactly where Sally made landfall, right on the border with the states. But like I said, I'm showing more of a landfall for this general area here, kind of for the Alabama-Mississippi border. That's what I'm predicting. And then the GFS is getting it right here, and then the National Hurricane Center getting it right here. So it seems as if models and the National Hurricane Center and I are getting along this storm. It's pretty impressive that they're actually getting along. But that still has a pretty big impact. If it's going from Florida to Louisiana, it's still a large area of uncertainty. But since it's most likely not going to become a major hurricane, it's not a super big deal. But still, if it does make a landfall as a hurricane, it's still going to bring in some slight storm surge, pretty heavy rain. But yeah, GFS getting into landfall at a 992 millibar storm. And actually, the GFS hits it right over my house. That the low pressure goes like almost right over my house on October 29th there. Check out the CMC. Here's CMC as well. I have not checked the 0Z on CMC yet, but let's see what they show. They show it entering very weak at 1,004 millibar, but they're showing it almost making landfall for Cuba. I don't understand that. I don't know why there's such a huge eastward push to closer to Cuba than Mexico. Obviously, that will impact where it makes landfall, but for some reason, I guess due to its limited strength, it's going to barely do a northern turn and hit Louisiana at 1,005 millibars. I really disagree with the CMC on that. I really do. For once, I actually kind of picked the GFS before the CMC. The icon, wow, this one's kind of really different. It's actually making landfall way inside the Yucatan Peninsula. I'm kind of showing it making landfall here. This is where I show it making landfall. Or that's what the National Hurricane Center, GFS, or me in the National Hurricane Center predict making landfall like right here. But Icon's getting it way down here near Belize, and that's obviously going to really make this landfall more to the west. That's going to make a landfall for Louisiana, while a lot more models are getting it kind of way to the east of that to kind of the eastern Gulf, and that's going to be making a huge impact. And look how far it is to the west. I mean, this is what the National Hurricane Center is showing. National Hurricane Center is kind of showing this. That's what National Hurricane Center is showing. This is what I showed. This is kind of what I'm showing right here, making landfall like that. GFS is showing this, and then CMC is kind of showing something like this. And look at the Icon. Icon is way all the way out here. I mean, that is way to the west. Let's just say that way to the west here. But let's go check out now the European on the winds. So let's check out what we have here. This is actually the next 24 hours. There it is at predicting there at around 40 knots. So that's around 50 miles an hour. Seems pretty reasonable. And then it gets just making landfall in the Yucatan Peninsula. That seems very reasonable. If it does avoid Yucatan, it's going to just skin it. It's not going to go like near Cuba, which is what the GFS and CMC are showing. As it kind of really straightens out, becoming a hurricane once it passes Mexico. And then it seems as if this model is showing it actually strengthening a good bit, which is why it actually heads for Florida in this case. But let's actually zoom in for... Let's zoom in towards the, let's check if we can go towards Alabama. There it is, Alabama. Let's check Mobile, because that's where it could very well make the landfall. Mobile, it's kind of going to be Mobile or really possibly Gulfport. And there it is. This is what it's showing there, making landfall at around... This is around 80, 85 miles an hour, which is a bit more, obviously pretty strong compared to what everybody else is predicting, but it does make landfall right in that far eastern Louisiana area. You can see that clear eye right there, and then it makes landfall kind of on the Alabama and Mississippi border. So it's kind of showing exactly what I'm saying. So I'm kind of glad models are actually agreeing with me. Not only are they agreeing with me, they're agreeing with me almost right on the dot. I mean, when I mean Florida, when I mean Alabama, Mississippi border, I don't mean like right here, right there. I mean dead on the border, like right there. That's what I'm showing. I mean right on the border. I don't mean a county away from the borderline, like right there. I don't mean right there. I mean literally on the border. That's what I'm showing in landfall. That's what I'm predicting for this to make landfall. And there it is, going to possibly make a landfall there. If not, this is actually probably just showing maybe this. That's kind of what it's probably showing. Maybe not right on the border, but at least a few miles away from the county borderline. And then obviously it does go further inland there. But last but not least, check out the moisture and the dryer, which I've been mentioning quite frequently throughout the video. Let's see what this shows. Obviously, it is going through it's stalling through the most favorable area where it has a ton of it has a ton of moisture, very warm water. But the thing is, it's probably going to get opened up by this dryer. Like I said, it's going to be very limited. It's not going to be to the point where it weakens a whole lot, but it's not going to be the point where it saves its stuff and it strengthens, if that makes sense. And you see there it is at 986 millibars, and it actually does weaken a bit to 988, and that's because, look, there is a slight amount of dryer getting inside of it, a slight amount, but since it's going to be rather weak, it's going to be maybe 75 miles an hour max, maybe 80 max. 80 is the max in my opinion. That little dryer is equivalent to it's not as small as it seems if it's going to be that weak of a storm. Obviously, if it was a Category 4, Category 3, that teeny little dryer wouldn't do anything. But since it's going to be rather weak and probably not the most organized once it gets in that general area, that teeny little dryer will be a little bit more severe than if it was a lot stronger. And then obviously it's going to make landfall right on the Alabama border and then go almost all straight over my house. But I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and bye guys.